Hi, welcome to Sunday Morning Announcements with the Jocelyn Gray avatar. If you're with us on Facebook or YouTube, please subscribe to get notifications when we have new videos. If you're with us on Zoom, please say hi in the chat. We'd love to say hello back. If you're with us in person, hello everybody here! And if this is your first visit, please sign the guest book either in the lobby or online at oakcliffuu.org/guest. Today, Renée Brill returns to the pulpit with Defensiveness and Denial as we near the end of the sermon series based on Tema Okun's paper, White Supremacy Culture Still Here. We hope you can stick around after the service for Talkback, where we gather in a circle and discuss the sermon and related topics. Adult Religious Exploration with Sarah Rickey is back with Owning Your Religious Past, a program designed to help UUs reckon with their various religious upbringings and integrate them into their current spiritual lives. Join on Zoom or in person in the Hope Library at 11:15. Today's topic, an exercise in reconciliation. At 1 o'clock today, our board meets in the Hope Common Room and on Zoom. This meeting is open to all. Just for this month, Jazz Jam will be on the third Sunday. So mark your calendars for November 19th from 3 to 5 p.m. Come play, sing, or just listen. You are welcome to bring food and drink for yourself or to share. Admission is free, though there is a tip jar for the musicians. Coming up this week, our Widening the Circle of Concern work group continues to meet on Monday at 7 p.m. Please join us by attending the weekly meeting and or submitting your comments and suggestions via email at wcoc@oakcliffuu.org. Note that the video of the presentation made by Renée Brill at the Fall Parish meeting about the planned DEI workshop is now available on our church website. Please view it or review it in preparation for the next call for a vote. Ministry and committee chairs, we hope to see you on Zoom at the Coordinating Council meeting on Tuesday the 14th at 7 p.m. The Social Justice Ministry Reading Group will not be meeting the next few weeks. They're starting a new book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, a novel by Sherman Alexie. The reading group meetings will resume on November 30th. Questions? Contact Mavis at sjm@oakcliffuu.org. Details on all of this and more can be found on the back of your order of service and in the weekly e-blast. Not receiving the e-blast? Just sign up at oakcliffuu.org/enews. It's that easy. Oh, almost forgot. Are you still wondering what to do for Thanksgiving? Family too far away? Geographically, politically, emotionally? Consider joining your church family on Thursday the 23rd for a Thanksgiving potluck. You can sign up at oakcliffuu.org/Thanksgiving2023. We plan to eat about 1 p.m. Bring a dish to share, and remember, we always need volunteers to help set up and clean up. And we have member anniversaries this week. Yolanda and Kevin Graham joined UUCOC on November 11th of 2018. Yay, Kevin and Yolanda. That's it for now. Have a great Sunday and rest of the week.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Oak Cliff. Let us begin our sacred work with these words by Pat Uribe Lichty. We gather. We gather, we bring our sorrows, our disappointments, our failures. We gather for healing, for laughter, and to rejoice. We gather to find new ways of loving, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. We gather. Yes, we always gather, for it is in gathering that we find our hope. We're going to light our chalice, and we're going to read the words of Soul Fire by Anastasia Barosh. As we light this flame of hope, may our congregation become a kaleidoscope of souls and people. In the presence of this flame, in me, in you, in us, is an invitation to sit at the table. May we tend our soul fire through these challenging and trying times to open the hearts and minds of all who enter our doors. In our community, we make time each week to share pieces of our lives with one another, our joys and sorrows. We do this because each person in this community has value. Each person's experience matters. We share our sorrow with one another today, knowing that sorrow comes into each person's life, knowing that together we offer comfort. Please share your sorrows publicly by posting them in the Zoom chat, or send them to our Facebook Messenger, or speak them aloud.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, when I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
We also share our joys with one another, knowing that joy comes into all our lives, knowing that joy calls unto joy, knowing that together our voices can rise in a chorus of celebration. Please share your joys publicly by posting them to the Zoom chat, or send them to our Facebook Messenger, or speak them aloud. Welcome to the UU Church of Oak Cliff. Here we gather in sanctuary where we're free to pursue our own unique and individual spiritual journeys in an atmosphere of acceptance, compassion, and celebration. We seek to build a community where what you believe is less important than how your beliefs guide and inform your participation in the world. Ours is a community that values the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. To our returning visitors, we are so happy you have joined us again. We know your time is precious, and we're honored to have you here today. And we would like to extend a warm welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. We recognize the bravery it took to come into a new place, and we're glad you're here. Ours is a covenantal church, Latin for come together. Covenant means a solemn agreement or promise from the heart regarding a course of action between parties. The practice of promising to walk together is the core of our faith. Simply put, it is a guide for the behavior we expect from ourselves and each other. We are bound together by the promises we make to one another, and we recite our covenant during every worship service. Please rise in body or spirit as we recite our covenant. Because we love one another, we honor each individual's spiritual journey. We celebrate life's abundance in service to each other, our community, and the world. We connect with each other in love, respect, and acceptance. Thus do we covenant together.
Porque nos amamos uno al otro, honoramos el viaje espiritual de cada individuo. Celebramos la abundancia de la vida en el servicio a entre sí, nuestra comunidad y el mundo. Ponemos en contacto a unos con otros en el amor, respeto y excepción, así que hacemos pacto.
Good morning. I would like to invite you into a little bit of grounding with me. And I wanted to invite us to do some stretching this morning. I carry a lot of my stress and tension through my shoulders and my neck and the top part of my back. So I thought we'd start with stretching that out. So the first thing I'm normally going to do is to tilt my head to the side and feel that stretch along the side of your neck. If you want to deepen that stretch, you can press down gently. And take a couple of breaths here. And then switch over to the other side. And then take your chin and kind of tuck that down. And I will normally like to press on my head a little bit just to deepen that stretch through the top part of my back. I'm going to press one arm across the top to pull my shoulder and kind of stretch along the top of my back and shoulder. Switch over to the other side. I can always tell which side I'm used to holding the baby on. And then let's end with reaching up and back and opening out our chest a little bit for some deep breaths. And when you're ready, find a comfortable spot in your chair. And this morning, we are going to start with a story from Plato's allegory of the cave. This story appears in Plato's Republic, and it's about not quite 2,500 years old. So it's a very old story. And I think that it's a story about defensiveness and denial, which is what we're going to talk about today as one of the qualities of white supremacy culture. So in Plato's allegory of the cave, Plato tells us to imagine some prisoners who have been raised in this cave with their backs facing the mouth of the cave. All they can see, and they're chained in such a way that they can't move around, so all they can see are the shadows that are cast on the wall of the cave in front of them. They can't look out of the cave or leave the cave, and this is really all they've ever known. So more or less, our prisoners have been watching a shadow puppet show for their whole life. And to them, that shadow puppet show is reality. When the voices of people passing by echo through the cave, they think that those voices are coming from the shadows themselves. And think and imagine the ways that shadows can stretch and distort and bend depending on how far or how close you are to the light. So a tiny little flower can look very, very big if it's close enough to the light source. It'll cast a much larger shadow. So these prisoners, to them, that is their reality. Plato then tells us to imagine that one of the prisoners is freed from their shackles and they leave the cave. And now, instead of watching this shadow puppet show, they can see the actual people and objects that are casting the shadow. And they can see that it's not shadows that are talking, it's people that are talking. They can see the colors, the shapes, they can touch, and it's kind of obvious, right? Like they've seen behind the screen, they've seen the movie magic, they've seen reality. And they've also seen how that reality is distorted into this puppet show. So having this new knowledge from their experience and from their new knowing, that person goes back into the cave, excited to tell their friends about this new reality, this new knowledge that they have acquired, excited to free their friends, to encourage them to leave the cave and go out into the world. And in Plato's story, Plato says that the other prisoners reject this idea, that they're angry at this person for coming back in and saying that everything that they've known their whole life is false, that they are really smart and they have thought very long and hard about this, and all of their opinions they agree on. And so to them, the puppet show is real. And the problem, the friction, the troublemaking isn't that they're chained up in this cave. The problem to them is that this person is coming to tell them that their reality is not true, and their beliefs are based on a distortion of the truth. And they're unwilling to follow their friend out into the world to see for themselves, to look at the evidence for themselves. Now, when I first heard this story, as a teenager, I thought it was really dumb. It seemed obvious to me that, like, why wouldn't you leave the cave and go see for yourself? Why wouldn't you go look at the evidence yourself? And now that I'm an adult, I can see how common this actually is, right? This idea of choosing ignorance and choosing what you've always believed over learning some new idea or learning a conflicting idea. There's so many examples of this in our recent history. We can talk about evolution and the preponderance of evidence around evolution being real, and yet there are people who are absolutely certain that it is not. And they'll tell you that all of those dinosaur bones have been planted by the devil, right? There's a preponderance of evidence that says that climate change is real. The majority of scientists agree that it's real. They're counting down the time that we have left to take real action on it. And yet there are still people who deny climate change, just like there's people who deny that the earth, there are still people who deny that the earth is round, deny that vaccines have value. There are people who deny that queer and LGBTQIA families are healthy and loving and natural. where we as Unitarian Universalists know that that's true, often experientially, right? Our friends are, or we are in loving relationships that are not conforming to this kind of weird gender norm, right? And so to us, that reality that LGBTQ people are whole people, that they're as good as and as bad as anybody else is obvious. It's self-evident. It's true that it's true to us, and yet there's so many people who are unwilling to consider the humanness of another person. We can also look back in our own history as Unitarian Universalists before we go giving ourselves a big pat on the back. It's good to remember that a lot of the people that we admire today as being a part of our Unitarian Universalist history, in their own day, they were ostracized. They were shunned for being too radical. The idea that enslaving other people and making your profit off of, and your fortune off of other people's forced labor is unethical was too radical. William Ellery Channing, this is one of the main reasons why he had to leave his church. It's especially problematic, probably for them at the time, because many of their donors were people who were making their money in that way. They were making their money off in businesses and as merchants, selling and buying and trading with enslavers in the southern part of the United States. So similarly, Ralph Waldo Emerson, although there's many Unitarian churches named for him today, in his own day, his own elders said that he was radical. And most of the things that we admire him for today are things that he had to do after he left the church. So there's this theme, this long-standing theme, that it is really difficult for all of us as humans to admit to our not knowing, to admit to being wrong. And so there's this idea of denial and defensiveness. In Tema Okun's White Supremacy Culture Still Here, she's listing this as a quality of white supremacy culture. Here's what she has to say. Defensiveness and denial reflect our cultural disease with truth-telling, particularly when we are speaking truth to power. White supremacy culture encourages a habit of denying and defending any speaking to or about it. White supremacy culture encourages a habit of silence about the things that matter. And as the collective of artists fighting the AIDS epidemic so wisely and succinctly said, silence equals death. So here, Tema Okun is naming the way that we avoid talking about white supremacy culture. It's treated as divisive, as negative, as troublemaking. And why don't we just kind of all go along to get along? Well, the answer to that is that we can't all go along to get along because we keep harming quite a few of those people. How does defensiveness show up? In our organizational structure, much of our time is spent trying to prevent abuse and protect power rather than to facilitate the capacities of each person or to clarify who has power and how they are expected to use it. Defensiveness can show up in either or binary thinking. In those in power, view or experience all criticism as threatening, inappropriate, or rude. People respond to new or challenging ideas with objections or criticism, making it very difficult to raise these ideas. People in the organization, particularly those with power, spend a lot of energy trying to make sure that their own feelings aren't getting hurt, forcing others to work around their defensiveness rather than addressing them head on. At its worst, they have convinced other people to do this work for them. White people spend energy defending against charges of racism instead of examining how racism might actually be happening. People claim that participation in anti-racist activity means they can't be racist or they can't be engaged in racism. White people might target other oppressions and express resentment because they experience the naming of racism as erasing their own experience of another oppression. And it is a culture where people are afraid to speak their truth. We know that a lot of this shows up in Unitarian Universalism. In the Widening the Circle of Concern report, it consistently said that people who try to talk about racism are ostracized from their communities, are called troublemakers, are called negative, and often end up leaving. I think what we're trying to do differently here is that we're trying to not do that. Here's some great antidotes that Tema Okun gives us to defensiveness. Understand that structure cannot in and of itself facilitate or prevent abuse. Understand the link between defensiveness and fear of losing power, losing face, losing comfort, losing privilege. Work on your own defensiveness. Ask yourself what you're defending against and why. Develop a culture of naming defensiveness as a problem when it is one. Set up a brainstorming session and other sessions designed to consider ideas ahead of time by naming defensiveness as a behavior and an attitude that the group wants to name and avoid. Give people credit for being able to handle more than you think. In other words, avoid deciding what someone can or cannot hear, particularly if you don't have evidence. When someone responds defensively, ask them to talk through what they are defending or defending against, and you might find rich information that way. Discuss the ways in which defensiveness or resistance to new ideas gets in the way of our mission. Use your own experience with your own defensiveness and resistance as an example. Consider the power differences at play. When someone with a lot of power is defensive and resistant, the options are very different than when someone with less or little power is defensive or resistant. Be clear about the power dynamics in the situation and respond thoughtfully. The person with power has greater responsibility to name and move through their own defensiveness and resistance, although the collective is best served when we all have these skills. Know that resentment is a form of defensiveness and signals that the person feeling the resentment feels unseen and unheard, or afraid of losing power. How does denial show up? Well, denial shows up just how it sounds, she says, denying what another person is saying about the ways in which white supremacy and/or racism are showing up in an interaction or a space. A pattern that often has a white person with different levels of power denying what a Black, Indigenous, or person of color or a whole community are saying about their experience of racism. Right? We can recognize that in Unitarian Universalism. The Widening the Circle of Concern report is put together by some of our brightest scholars and with quite a lot of work. It's a graduate level thesis that some Unitarian Universalists aren't interested in taking the time to treat as a scholarly source. Claiming the right to define what is and is not racism, insisting that white supremacy and racism require intent, and attempting to separate intent from impact in order to claim that if racism is not intended, then it's not happening. Refusal to consider or acknowledge the historical legacy of white supremacy and racism and the structural nature of racial disparities. The refusal or inability to feel the emotional cost of racism. At worst, suggesting that acts of violence and rage targeting BIPOC communities and people are deserved and or necessary. And at best, ignoring and downplaying those acts of violence when they're directed at BIPOC populations. Insisting that individually or collectively a person or group is free from racialized conditioning, leading to statements like, I don't see color and we're all the same. Refusing to acknowledge the benefits of belonging to the white group while generalizing about BIPOC people and communities. Seeing only and understanding the actions of white people as individuals, but generalizing whole BIPOC groups. Erasing intersectionality, generalizing about a whole group without recognizing the ways in which class, gender, sexuality, religion, age, disability, and ability, and other identities inform individual and collective experience. I want to particularly point out that she's saying that claiming that you are completely immune to all of the racialized conditioning that we experience from the time we wake up until the time we go to sleep, in media, on the radio, on TV, in commercials, in books, in our schools, that tell us that white people are better or more important or more valuable than people of color, insisting that you can be immune to that is a form of denial. Assuming that, what are some of our antidotes to this denial? Assume that any naming of racism is on target. Instead of asking if it is or isn't racism, ask, how is it racism? So assume that when a person of color or when anyone says that something is probably racist, believe that it likely is, and ask for understanding about how it is. Understand deep in our bones that naming racism is the first step towards repair. Learn to acknowledge any fear that naming brings up. The feeling of fear is not wrong or right, but should be named so that you can move through that feeling and address what is being raised. For white people, avoid taking accusations of racism or collusion in racism personally. Avoid defending yourself. Learn to say, tell me more. Understand your racism or your collusion in racism as conditioning and not who you essentially are. Understand that your awareness of your conditioning is necessary if you are going to change and grow. Call yourself and others in, not out. We will not grow the movement through shame and blame, even though shame and blame are necessary elements of our own individual and personal development. We will grow the movement by holding each other accountable from positions of care, kindness, and love. Sometimes we will have to employ tough love, and the goal is always to avoid throwing ourselves or anyone else away. Know our history and learn our history. Understand how racist patterns repeat over and over. Learn about the history of the recurring structural power, privilege, and benefits bestowed on the white group at the expense of BIPOC people and communities. Learn to admit when you are wrong. Understand that vulnerability can be a strength, particularly if you're sitting in a position of power and privilege. Understand that not everyone can afford to be vulnerable in the same way. Develop your self-awareness and emotional intelligence so that you can take responsibility for yourself and your emotions in collective and collaborative work. Take the time to understand yourself both as an individual and as a part of a racialized group. And again, we all belong to racialized groups. Take the time to understand that you are deeply informed by your racial groups, and understand that while you're not defined by those groups, they have informed your experiential knowing. And lastly, she says to acknowledge the power of intersectionality. Being a white cisgendered owning class male is a different experience than being a white gender nonconforming working class person. While the construct of whiteness and racial grouping means that we are being invited into the same construct, the invitation looks different and will be different in each lived experience. So we're all invited as white people to participate and to collude with white supremacy culture, but we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. When I think about my own denial and my own defensiveness, I know that it's rooted in a place of how hard I worked to ever be heard in the first place, right? How hard I had to work to be heard in the first place, to have my own ideas. I think that might be a part of becoming an adult. But I think that becoming an elder, becoming a leader, is more about learning to listen, learning to admit that you're wrong, looking for new ideas and genuinely following them where they lead you, and trying to live into your principles, even when it's uncomfortable. There is something that Tema Okun doesn't say here that is often true, and that is that when we start trying to talk about racism, many of our peers retreat into this defensiveness and denial so far that they believe we are telling them that they're monsters, even when we're not. If that's the fear, we need to not feed into that fear. So we need to take the time to be compassionate, patient, and to remember how sure we used to be when we were in the cave that we knew what all the answers were. So however obvious what is true might be to us, to not treat others as unkind or foolish because they haven't been out of the cave yet. I think the other thing that I find helpful is remembering and believing that one day I will be deeply wrong about something. That my son, who I raised to live into Unitarian Universalist values, will come to me one day and say, "Mom, you say you believe this, and yet here is how you are not living into that belief." It seems to be a pattern that repeats itself across time. I hope that I will take a deep breath and listen. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come yet again, come. Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come yet again, come. Thank you, y'all. That was beautiful.
Join me now, if you would, in reciting our Widening the Circle of Concern covenant, part of what I consider the vital anti-racism work that many of us have undertaken here. We, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Oak Cliff, commit ourselves to the study and dismantling of racism and oppression within our congregation. We commit our congregation and ourselves to the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression. We commit ourselves to listening, to learning, and to action. When we fail, we commit ourselves to trying again and again. We covenant to begin this work and to continue until all of us can truly say that we are a beloved community of justice, equity, and compassion. Our widening moment reflection today comes to us from Reverend Marisol Caballero. Reverend Marisol is a queer neurodivergent UU minister who has served with both UUA's Faith Development Office and with DRUM, Diverse and Revolutionary UU Multicultural Ministries, a Unitarian Universalist People of Color Ministry, and Anti-Racist Collective. She is a native Texan who lives and works in Austin and enjoys social justice activism, cooking, dancing ballet folklorico, gardening, and traveling with her puppy dog, Diego. And there are a couple of other places where I may stumble on pronunciations, even though I practiced them this week. So I ask your patience with me. Reverend Marisol writes, "Courage requires vulnerability. Though we tremble before uncertain futures, May we meet illness, death, and adversity with strength. May we dance in the face of our fears, writes trailblazer Gloria Anzaldúa, who knew a thing or two about courage. Courage requires both vulnerability and careful strategy. Like other people of color, Reverend Marisol writes, I don't often show my full self in mostly white company. I am guarded, not inauthentic, because the me that has learned to navigate mostly white spaces is a part of me. It just isn't my whole self. To bring my full self would risk being misunderstood. More than that, I would risk inviting even more harmful words and behaviors into my day. And already each day is an exhausting dance of negotiating interactions and conversation. Hundreds of times a day, she continues, I must ask myself, how much of me do I allow this person or group to see? How much of that decision is about risking vulnerability, and how much is about self-preservation? Does withholding my full self alleviate the discomfort of another, or does it bring me closer to true freedom? Who benefits from this risk more? Courage is not demanding safety when confronting the annoyance of having one's haughty and long-held answers questioned. It is incompatible with despair. Courage is not becoming defensive or insisting upon being viewed as an individual when the privileges of membership in a dominant group are brought to light. Rather, courage recognizes that growth insists on a willingness to be utterly transformed. Courage is not believing that anyone is helping or coming to the assistance of members of marginalized groups. Rather, it is recognizing that the need to play savior comes from societal brainwashing caused by systems that convince some they are superior over others. Courage is seeking one's own liberation from these lies, knowing it will require a relinquishment of power and an admittance that they've been bamboozled. Courage does not require perfection from us, or airtight plans, or even expertise. I'll tell you what courage does require. Courage requires great risks while stepping into the unknown. It takes no courage to shut one's mouth, step aside, and listen when needed. The only thing at risk here is one's ego, a self-identity built around the myth of superiority. Courage does not ask us to stop trembling. It asks us to find ways to incorporate our trembles into our dance. Courage, the faithful companion of hope, is sticking around when we and us are spoken in contexts that clearly don't mean me. Courage is claiming this faith as home when nearly everything around me says I am out of place, yet everything inside me says I am home. Courage is the generations and generations of ancestors who taught us to actively pursue joy, laughter, and celebration alongside our outrage, grief, and fatigue. The goddess Tanantzin, Madre de Mexico, bringer of corn, Nuestra Morenita, teaches that we can make for ourselves a place of comfort and leave room for wonder, even when our home has been invaded and has become nearly unrecognizable. Courage is being firm in saying, I know exactly where home is and what it looks like. I will figure out any way to get there with the help of good friends. We will dance the whole way there through the terrifying unknown. I will brave the rough waters knowing that my boat may be small, but it is strong. I will leave a trail of beauty in my wake so that other courageous seekers who follow will not be lonely on their journeys. And I, Sherry, speaking now, I want to bring this reflection to a close by asking you to repeat with me one particular line from Reverend Marisol's reflection. I'll give it to you, and then you can repeat it back, because I just think it is beautiful. Courage does not ask us to stop trembling. It asks us to find ways to incorporate our trembles into our dance. Thank you.
The Reverend Erica Hewitt suggests that the offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission, which is the creation of a beloved community. Members, if you are contributing cash towards your pledge, please use the envelope provided and write your name on it. To text your donation, see the number on your order of service, 214-225-5996. For more options, see oakcliffuu.org/donate. Our closing words come to us today from Joseph M. Cherry, Prayer for Living in Tension. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Extinguimos esta llama, pero no la luz de la verdad, el calor de comunidad o el fuego de nuestro compromiso. Estos los llevaremos en el corazón hasta que estemos juntos otra vez.